In the first week of September 1944, a German panzer officer stood beside a country road in occupied France, watching something that contradicted every principle of military science he had been taught. American trucks passed in an endless stream, headlights blazing, no spacing between vehicles, no camouflage discipline, no apparent concern for air attack or artillery interdiction. He counted vehicles for 30 minutes and stopped at 400. The convoy showed no signs of ending. He turned to his adjutant and said something that would be repeated in Wehrmacht headquarters within days. "We are not fighting an army. We are fighting a factory that moves." That officer was witnessing the Red Ball Express, the most audacious logistics operation in military history. An operation German generals had declared impossible. An operation that would redefine modern warfare and prove that in industrial conflict, supply lines matter more than battle lines. An operation crewed primarily by men the Nazi regime considered racially inferior, who would demonstrate through sheer determination and mechanical skill that ideology crumbles before industrial reality. This is the story of how 23,000 truck drivers, 75% of them African American, defeated the Wehrmacht not with bullets, but with relentless supply. How they drove through exhaustion and mechanical failure to keep George Patton's Third Army advancing when every German calculation said it should have stopped. How they proved that modern warfare is won not by tactical brilliance, but by the unglamorous work of moving fuel, ammunition, and food across hundreds of miles of damaged roads under impossible conditions. The Germans laughed at American logistics in August 1944. By November, they were surrendering to armies those logistics had made unstoppable. This is how it happened. August 19, 1944. General Alfred Jodl sat in Wehrmacht headquarters in East Prussia, reviewing intelligence reports from the collapsing Western Front with the confidence of a man who understood military mathematics. His staff had calculated everything with Prussian precision. Patton's Third Army had advanced 400 miles in 30 days, an extraordinary tactical achievement. But tactical success means nothing without logistical sustainability. And the Americans, Jodl believed, had just outrun their supply lines. The mathematics seemed irrefutable. An armored division consumed 150,000 gallons of fuel daily when advancing. Patton commanded 12 divisions pushing eastward on a 60-mile front. That meant 12,000 tons of supplies needed every single day, transported 400 miles from the Normandy beaches over roads the Germans had systematically destroyed during their retreat. The calculation was simple. Patton would halt within 48 hours, perhaps 72 at most. No army in history had sustained such an advance. Physical laws could not be violated, not even by American industry. Jodl's confidence came from experience, not arrogance. The Wehrmacht had pioneered blitzkrieg. They understood intimately the tyranny of distance in mechanized warfare. Their own campaigns had repeatedly demonstrated the iron law of logistics. Tactical success creates operational vulnerability. The faster you advance, the thinner your supply lines stretch. The thinner your supply lines, the more certain your eventual halt. In Russia, Wehrmacht spearheads had reached the outskirts of Moscow before logistics, not Soviet resistance, stopped them. German trucks had broken down on primitive Russian roads. Horse-drawn wagons, still 80% of German military transport, couldn't match the speed of panzer divisions. Railway gauge differences meant supplies piled up hundreds of miles behind the front. The Germans had learned through bitter experience that modern armies move only as fast as their slowest supply truck. And now the Americans faced the same mathematical impossibility. Jodl reviewed the intelligence again. Patton's forces were consuming supplies faster than any army in history. Sherman tanks burned through fuel at half a mile per gallon on roads worse cross-country. Each infantry division required 700 tons of supplies daily. Each armored division needed 1,000 tons. Multiply that across 12 divisions advancing simultaneously, and the numbers became impossible. What Jodl didn't know, what no German commander even suspected, was that 125 miles away, 5,958 trucks were already rolling eastward in the largest military convoy in history. The Red Ball Express had been operational for 2 days. It was already delivering 12,500 tons of supplies every 24 hours, and it was accelerating. The concept violated everything German military doctrine considered sound practice. Lieutenant Colonel Levin Ayers of the Motor Transport Service had proposed something that made experienced logistics officers physically uncomfortable. Create a one-way highway system from the Normandy beaches to the front lines. Every vehicle runs 20 hours out of 24. No stopping except for fuel and mechanical emergencies. Convoys depart every 5 minutes. Average speed 35 miles per hour, maintained regardless of conditions. Headlights blazing day and night, abandoning all blackout discipline. The name came from American railroad terminology. A Red Ball freight was an express shipment that took absolute priority over everything else. The Red Ball Express would operate on the same principle. No delays, no exceptions, no compromises. German logistics officers, when they eventually learned of this system, were horrified by its inefficiency. Vehicles operating 20 hours daily meant catastrophic maintenance problems. No spacing between convoys meant a single breakdown could create cascading delays. Abandoning blackout discipline invited air attacks. Running trucks until they failed, then simply replacing them, was wasteful beyond comprehension. But the Germans were thinking in terms of European warfare, where resources were finite and conservation essential. The Americans were thinking in terms of industrial abundance, where replacement was cheaper than repair and volume overwhelmed inefficiency. On August 26, 1944, drivers from the 3916 Quartermaster Truck Company climbed into their GMC CCKW 2.5-ton trucks. The vehicles were nicknamed Deuce and a Halfs by the men who drove them. Each truck was loaded with 5 tons of supplies, sometimes 7 when drivers illegally overloaded. The cargo varied: artillery shells, mortar rounds, machine gun ammunition, medical supplies, rations, fuel in jerry cans, replacement parts. Everything an advancing army needed to keep fighting. The drivers were almost entirely African American. In a still segregated military, black soldiers were systematically excluded from combat roles. They couldn't fight alongside white soldiers. They couldn't command white troops. They were assigned to service roles, construction battalions, quartermaster companies, supply units. Jobs the military considered less important. What the military establishment failed to understand was that in modern mechanized warfare, supply is combat. The men who keep armies moving are as essential as the men who pull triggers. The Red Ball Express drivers were about to prove this in the most dramatic way possible. They would keep Patton's army advancing when German calculations said it should stop. They would deliver victory not through violence, but through relentless, exhausting, dangerous work that never made headlines but made everything else possible. The drivers developed their own culture immediately. They painted slogans on their trucks: Patton's Blood Bank, Hitler, Here We Come, Detroit to Berlin Express. They created their own traffic rules that superseded official regulations. Slower vehicles pulled off the road immediately when faster trucks approached. Any vehicle traveling below 20 miles per hour was considered a road hazard and pushed into ditches. Mechanical failures were not repaired on the road but abandoned. The mission was speed, not preservation. By August 28th, German reconnaissance units began reporting something unprecedented. Radio intercepts from Aufklärung 116, observing the main Red Ball route from concealed positions, transmitted continuous reports that Wehrmacht intelligence initially dismissed as exaggerated. Continuous vehicle column visible, headlights illuminating the road for 20 kilometers. Estimate 1,000 vehicles per hour passing our position. No spacing, no blackout discipline. The Americans appear to have abandoned all military precaution. This violated everything German military science taught. Headlights at night invited Luftwaffe attack. Continuous columns presented perfect artillery targets. No spacing between vehicles meant a single disabled truck could halt an entire convoy. The Americans seemed to be committing suicide by logistics, except the Luftwaffe couldn't attack because it barely existed anymore. Allied air superiority was so complete that German aircraft rarely flew in daylight, and German artillery couldn't reach the Red Ball routes because Patton's advance had pushed German forces far beyond artillery range of the supply lines. What the Germans interpreted as reckless disregard for military procedure was actually supreme confidence born of overwhelming strength. The Americans ran convoys with headlights blazing because they didn't fear German air power. They didn't space vehicles because they had so many trucks that losing a few to accidents didn't matter. They didn't follow European military conventions because they didn't need to. General Edgar Feuchtinger, commanding 21st Panzer Division, personally observed the Red Ball Express from concealed positions on August 30th. His report to Army Group B headquarters reflected not just military assessment but existential alarm. The enemy operates a supply system beyond our comprehension. Vehicles pass at 30-second intervals, day and night, without pause. They don't hide, they don't disperse. They don't follow any rules we understand. This is not military science. This is mass production applied to warfare. We are not fighting soldiers. We are fighting factories. What Feuchtinger was witnessing was American logistics operating on fundamentally different principles than European military tradition. German doctrine emphasized careful planning, conservation of resources, and proper maintenance procedures. Vehicles were precious. Fuel was rationed. Every truck mattered because Germany couldn't replace losses quickly. American logistics assumed 20% mechanical failure rates and planned accordingly. Built redundancy into every system, accepted waste as the cost of speed, replaced rather than repaired. The contrast was so stark that German observers literally couldn't comprehend what they were seeing. The Americans were violating every principle of efficient logistics and somehow achieving results that efficient logistics never could. The numbers the Red Ball Express achieved in its first week defied German calculations of physical possibility. From August 25th to 31st, 89,939 tons of supplies delivered. Daily averaged 12,848 tons. Each truck making 1.5 round trips daily over a 686-mile circuit. This meant nearly 6,000 trucks in constant motion, consuming 300,000 gallons of gasoline daily just for the operation itself. German logistics specialists examined captured American documents and dismissed these figures as propaganda. No transportation system could move that tonnage over that distance that quickly. The mathematics didn't work. Trucks broke down. Drivers required rest. Roads had limited capacity. These were physical constraints that couldn't be overcome by American optimism or industrial production. But the numbers were absolutely real, and they were accelerating. By September 5th, the Red Ball Express had established a rhythm that Wehrmacht logistics officers found incomprehensible. Convoys departed every 5 minutes from western staging areas. Each convoy averaged 67 vehicles. Each vehicle carried 5 tons standard, 7 tons when overloaded. Time to cover 350 miles one way averaged 14 hours. Turnaround time at each end ran 2 hours for unloading, refueling, and rest. This meant 5,000 vehicles in constant motion at any given moment. The system generated innovations hourly as drivers and mechanics solved problems German military science considered insurmountable. When trucks broke down, approximately 1,800 daily, mobile maintenance units performed repairs on the roadside. Mechanics developed a brutal triage system. 15 minutes to fix it or push it off the road. Parts were cannibalized from vehicles deemed unrepairable. Engines were swapped in 45 minutes using mobile cranes. Transmissions were replaced trackside. Tires were changed while drivers slept beside their trucks. When designated red ball routes became congested, drivers simply created new routes. They commandeered French civilian buses to move personnel, freeing cargo trucks for supplies. They borrowed captured German vehicles, painted them olive drab, and pressed them into service. When bridges were destroyed, they built bypasses using rubble from bombed buildings as roadbed. When roads were blocked, they drove through fields, creating new roads through sheer repetition. The Germans, observing this organized chaos, couldn't comprehend how it produced results. German logistics doctrine emphasized detailed planning, maintenance schedules, proper procedures. The Americans violated every principle, yet their system accelerated rather than collapsed. It was as if the Americans had discovered that military science didn't apply to them, that they operated under different physical laws where waste became efficiency and chaos produced order. The fuel management alone stunned German observers. The Red Ball Express consumed 300,000 gallons of gasoline daily just for its own operations, more fuel than entire German armies received for all purposes. Yet American fuel supplies never ran short. The reason was Operation Pluto, pipelines under the ocean, laying fuel pipelines across the English Channel that German intelligence hadn't even detected. By September 1944, gasoline flowed through underwater pipes at rates that supplied not just the Red Ball Express, but all Allied operations. Forward fuel dumps were established every 25 miles along Red Ball routes. Tanker trucks ran their own parallel convoy system. No vehicle waited more than 10 minutes for refueling. The Americans had created a fuel distribution system that treated gasoline like water, abundant and freely flowing, while German panzer divisions were immobilized for lack of 20,000 gallons. General Walter Warlimont, reviewing aerial reconnaissance photographs, made an observation that revealed how completely American logistics had overturned German military understanding. The Americans have fuel dumps larger than our entire strategic reserves. They burn more gasoline moving gasoline than we allocate to entire panzer divisions. This is not warfare as we understand it. This is industrial overflow. They are not fighting efficiently. They are drowning us in excess. The Red Ball Express didn't just supply Patton's advance. It multiplied its speed exponentially beyond anything German defensive planning had anticipated. Wehrmacht doctrine calculated that an armored division could sustain 20 to 30 miles advance daily under optimal conditions. That was the absolute maximum speed at which mechanized forces could move while maintaining cohesion and supply. Patton's divisions, supplied by the Red Ball Express, averaged 40 to 60 miles daily for weeks. On September 1st, 4th Armored Division advanced 35 miles in morning operations, halted at noon for resupply, and Red Ball trucks were already waiting with fuel and ammunition. The division advanced another 32 miles that afternoon, 67 miles in a single day. This shattered German defensive planning, which assumed maximum 30-mile daily advances and positioned defensive lines accordingly. General Heinz Guderian, reviewing reports in East Prussia, initially refused to believe them. No armored force can advance 60 miles daily for a week. Mechanical failures alone prevent such sustained movement. This must be propaganda or misidentification of different units. But intercepted American radio traffic confirmed it. More disturbing for German commanders, the Americans were broadcasting their positions openly, in clear language without codes, supremely confident that they could move faster than Germans could react. By early September, German intelligence had compiled comprehensive reports on the Red Ball Express. The implications were catastrophic for Wehrmacht planning. Every assumption about American military capability required fundamental revision. The reports contained observations that contradicted everything German military education taught. Americans abandoned damaged trucks rather than repairing them, treating vehicles as disposable. Drivers operated on stimulants for days, violating every principle of personnel management. No camouflage discipline existed, making the entire system vulnerable to air attacks that never materialized. Mechanical failure rates of 30% daily were simply overwhelmed by redundancy. Fuel consumption that would bankrupt any European military was sustained indefinitely. Field Marshal Walter Model's response to these reports revealed the desperation now gripping German high command. If these observations are accurate, we face not merely a superior army but a superior civilization. They make no effort to hide because they genuinely do not fear us. They waste resources because they possess effectively infinite resources. We cannot defeat this with military tactics. This requires political solutions we do not have. The human cost of the Red Ball Express remained invisible to German observers who saw only endless trucks. Drivers operated for 72 hours straight, hallucinating from exhaustion and benzodrine. 300 drivers died during the operation's duration. Trucks collided in fog, overturned on damaged roads, burned when overheated engines ignited fuel leaks. Bodies were pulled from wrecked vehicles and buried in French churchyards, while replacement drivers climbed into repaired trucks and continued the mission. Yet morale remained extraordinarily high. These men, predominantly African American, understood they were making history. They were proving Nazi racial ideology wrong with every mile driven. Every ton delivered was evidence that Hitler's theories about racial capability were lies. They were fighting racism with truck keys, defeating fascist ideology through superior performance. Some African American drivers kept journals during the Red Ball operations. One sergeant from Georgia wrote, "The Germans think we are inferior. Their propaganda says blacks cannot handle complex machinery or work without white supervision. Every truck I drive past their positions proves them wrong. Every delivery I make defeats Hitler better than bullets could. This is my combat. I am winning it." German prisoners forced to work as laborers loading Red Ball trucks experienced cognitive dissonance that shattered their ideological foundations. They worked alongside African American sergeants who calculated load distributions faster than German engineers. who spoke better English than German English instructors had taught, who treated prisoners fairly and professionally despite everything Nazi propaganda had claimed about how racial inferiors behaved. One captured Wehrmacht officer, interviewed after the war, admitted, "I had been taught that blacks were subhuman, incapable of technical work or independent thought. Then I spent weeks watching colored American soldiers perform logistics miracles we could not match. They outworked us, outthought us, and proved every word of our racial education was a lie. It destroyed my faith in everything I had been taught. The infrastructure required for the Red Ball Express would have taken German military engineers months to create. The Americans built it while the operation was running. Engineers constructed or reinforced 40 bridges, created 15 major fuel depots, established 26 maintenance stations, built 8 temporary cities for drivers to rest between runs, all accomplished during active operations, with German forces still capable of artillery strikes on forward positions. The bridge at Mainz had been destroyed by German engineers specifically to halt American logistics. Wehrmacht calculations estimated replacement would require 6 weeks minimum. American engineers built a temporary bridge in 14 hours, while Red Ball convoys detoured only 8 miles on hastily bulldozed bypass roads. German engineers observing American construction methods were amazed by the complete absence of planning meetings or detailed blueprints. Americans simply assessed what needed doing and did it immediately. One German engineering officer captured in September commented, "They build faster than we can destroy. We spent weeks preparing demolitions. They repair damage in hours. This is not engineering as we understand it. This is construction elevated to industrial warfare." The Red Ball Express achieved one result that particularly stunned German artillery officers. American forces fired artillery without restriction, a luxury no German unit had enjoyed since 1942. During the reduction of Metz fortifications in September, XIX Corps artillery fired 100,000 rounds in 24 hours. The Red Ball Express delivered every shell plus 20% surplus for the next day's operations. German artillery defending Metz was rationed to 50 rounds per gun per day. The disparity was psychologically crushing. American guns fired continuously for hours. German artillery officers calculated such bombardments required 50 truckloads of ammunition per hour. The Red Ball provided it without pause. German soldiers learned to recognize the sound of American supply convoys even from miles away. The endless rumble of motors became more demoralizing than artillery fire, because it meant American abundance was inexhaustible. Vehicle attrition rates would have paralyzed any European military. By late September, the statistics were catastrophic by German standards. Average Red Ball vehicle lifespan was 10,000 miles compared to 30,000 under normal operations. Daily deadline rate reached 30% of all vehicles, 500 engines replaced weekly, 10,000 tires consumed weekly. Over 5,000 vehicles destroyed or abandoned completely. Yet the operation never slowed. American production had anticipated such losses. Ships arrived weekly at French ports carrying hundreds of new trucks. Replacement drivers received 2 days of training and were thrown into convoys. German intelligence calculated Americans were destroying more trucks weekly than the entire Wehrmacht possessed in France. Yet American transport capacity increased rather than decreased. They had achieved something impossible by European military logic. Logistics faster than attrition, production exceeding consumption, abundance overwhelming scarcity. The Red Ball Express faced its greatest challenge in early September when Patton's advance pushed so far that even this remarkable system began showing strain. Round trips now exceeded 700 miles. Drivers were collapsing from exhaustion. Vehicles were disintegrating under sustained abuse. German intelligence detected the weakness, and Field Marshal Model prepared counterattacks designed to exploit American supply line vulnerability. But within 72 hours, American adaptability again surprised German planners. The Red Ball reorganized completely, created intermediate transfer points cutting individual runs to 350 miles, implemented driver rotation systems allowing rest, established forward maintenance bases with equipment to perform major repairs, doubled the number of assigned vehicles. By September 12th, tonnage delivery had actually increased. The crisis that should have halted Patton's advance only made the system more efficient. Supplementing the Red Ball Express, Americans implemented aerial supply that Germans considered impossible at such scale. C-47 transport aircraft began delivering critical supplies directly to forward units. Each aircraft carried 3 tons. On September 16th, Wehrmacht observers counted 900 transport flights in a single day, delivering 2,700 tons by air. The Luftwaffe, at its operational peak, had managed 300 tons daily to Stalingrad and considered that maximum effort requiring every available transport. The Americans were using cargo planes like trucks, accepting losses and overwhelming them with numbers. The Wehrmacht couldn't compete with this arithmetic of abundance. By October, advancing railheads began reducing Red Ball Express requirements. The operation, designed to last 10 days, had continued for 82 days. 412,000 tons of supplies delivered over 122 million ton-miles. The Red Ball Express had accomplished what German military science declared physically impossible. Field Marshal Model, now fighting on German borders, wrote in his final operational assessment, "We were defeated not primarily by American tanks or aircraft. We were defeated by American trucks." The Red Ball Express proved logistics is strategy in modern warfare. We learned this lesson too late to matter. The African-American soldiers, who comprised 75% of Red Ball drivers, had demonstrated something more profound than logistics capability. They had proven through exhausting, dangerous, unglamorous work that racist ideology collapses when confronted with performance. Nazi theories about racial capability couldn't survive contact with reality when that reality was 23,000 black soldiers achieving what white German soldiers couldn't match. General Eisenhower, visiting Red Ball operations in September, witnessed the contradiction between American segregation and military necessity. His aide recorded the general saying, "These men are winning the war as surely as any infantry. We need to reconsider many fundamental assumptions." The Red Ball's success created pressure for military integration that contributed to desegregation 3 years later. The Red Ball Express ended on November 16, 1944, but its impact resonated through military history permanently. It proved that in industrial warfare, the nation that can deliver the most supplies fastest wins regardless of tactical brilliance. American logistics doctrine fundamentally changed: volume over efficiency, replacement over repair, speed over conservation. These principles, proven by the Red Ball, became American military practice that continues today. German generals captured at war's end universally cited the Red Ball Express as the moment they understood defeat was inevitable. General der Panzertruppen Hass von Manteuffel stated during interrogation, "When we comprehended your logistics capacity, we knew continued resistance was futile. You supplied armies faster than we could destroy them. The Red Ball Express was a weapon against which we had no defense." Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, among Germany's most capable commanders, was asked what surprised him most about American forces. His answer was immediate. "Not your tanks, not your aircraft, your trucks. The Red Ball Express demonstrated you had militarized your entire society's industrial capacity. We were fighting your factories, not merely your soldiers. That cannot be defeated through military means." The final statistics stand as testament to industrial warfare's triumph over traditional military thinking. 82 days of continuous operations, 412,193 tons delivered, 222 million ton-miles covered, nearly 6,000 trucks operating daily, 23,000 drivers employed, 700,000 gallons of fuel consumed each day, 15 million rations transported, 135,000 tons of medical supplies delivered. Behind these numbers were individual acts of dedication that Germans found incomprehensible within their military culture. Corporal John Houston drove continuously for 48 hours delivering ammunition to 2nd Armored Division, falling asleep at the wheel 3 times but continuing after being revived. Private Booker Washington's truck caught fire while carrying medical supplies. Instead of abandoning the burning vehicle as regulations required, he drove 2 miles to a field hospital, jumping out as flames reached the cab. The supplies saved wounded soldiers from both armies. These stories, multiplied thousands of times, revealed American military culture to observing Germans. Individual initiative, calculated risk-taking, mission accomplishment over regulatory compliance, values that contradicted everything Wehrmacht discipline taught. Desperately, German forces attempted creating their own version during the Battle of the Bulge. Operation Grafe included plans for captured American trucks to establish German supply lines. The effort failed immediately. German drivers couldn't maintain American speeds. German mechanics couldn't repair American equipment fast enough. German fuel supplies couldn't sustain consumption rates. Most fundamentally, Germans couldn't replicate the American attitude of treating resources as abundant rather than scarce. The winter of 1944-45 provided the ultimate test. Freezing rain, snow, and ice should have stopped wheeled transport. German doctrine stated wheeled logistics became impossible below -10°C. Yet Red Ball convoys continued. Drivers wrapped chains on tires, poured alcohol in radiators, kept rolling. Speeds dropped from 35 to 15 miles per hour, but tonnage delivery never stopped. German observers reported ice-covered convoys moving through blizzards that had immobilized panzer divisions. The Americans had created a logistics system that functioned regardless of weather, terrain, or enemy action. It wasn't elegant or efficient by German standards, but it was utterly unstoppable. In May 1945, captured German logistics officers studied Red Ball Express operations for historical records. Their conclusions were unanimous and devastating to German military pride. General der Infanterie Friedrich Schulz summarized, "The Red Ball Express represents warfare we never imagined possible. Americans created a temporary civilization, thousands of men and vehicles and millions of tons that existed solely to feed armies, then dissolved when no longer needed. We built permanent infrastructure over years. They created superior temporary systems in days. This taught us we were fighting an enemy whose capabilities exceeded our conceptual framework. The most insightful analysis came from General Heinz Guderian, father of German armored warfare theory. We invented blitzkrieg, but never solved its fundamental limitation of logistics. Americans solved this through industrial excess we deemed impossible. The Red Ball Express was not merely a supply line, but a flowing river of materiel that drowned our forces in Allied abundance. We lost not because our tactics failed, but because their logistics succeeded beyond what we imagined possible. The Red Ball Express cost approximately $100 million in 1944 currency. Vehicles destroyed, fuel consumed, roads damaged, French civilian claims. German staff officers accustomed to managing scarcity found the figure incomprehensible. Yet Americans considered it extraordinarily cheap. The operation enabled capturing 400,000 German soldiers, liberating France, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and shortening the war by approximately 6 months. Each day of war cost America $250 million. The Red Ball Express paid for itself in less than half a day of shortened conflict. Thousands of Red Ball veterans returned to America and revolutionized civilian logistics. They founded trucking companies applying military lessons to commerce. Companies like Yellow Freight, Roadway, and Consolidated Freightways were started by veterans who learned in France that volume beats efficiency, speed beats perfection, and keeping trucks rolling 24 hours can move the world. On the 50th anniversary of D-Day in 1994, the United States Postal Service issued a commemorative stamp honoring the Red Ball Express. Veterans who attended the ceremony spoke of pride in an operation overshadowed by combat but equally decisive. They had been black soldiers mostly, segregated and discriminated against, denied recognition during the war. But they had delivered victory at 35 miles per hour, proving through exhausting work that American abundance could defeat Nazi ideology. The highways of France still bear scars from the Red Ball Express, ruts worn by overloaded trucks, bridges hastily repaired, roadsides where abandoned vehicles rusted for decades, but the greatest monument to the operation is the speed of Allied victory. Every day the war shortened saved thousands of lives. The Red Ball Express shortened it by months. In the end, German generals who laughed at American logistics in August 1944 signed surrender documents in May 1945. Defeated by 23,000 truck drivers who revolutionized warfare at 35 miles per hour. Their story deserves its place among great military operations not because it was elegant or efficient. It was neither, but because it worked. The Red Ball Express kept Patton rolling, kept Germans retreating, and proved that in modern war, supply convoys matter more than tank columns. The last word belongs to a German officer whose name history lost, quoted by a Red Ball driver at the 1994 commemoration. Standing beside a Belgian road watching the endless convoy of American trucks, the officer said in accented English to his captors, "We prepared for everything. Your tanks, your planes, your ships. We never prepared for your trucks. How do you defeat an enemy who has more trucks than you have soldiers?" The answer rolled past him at 5-minute intervals, driven by exhausted Americans rewriting warfare's rules one delivery at a time. The Red Ball Express transformed logistics into strategy, supply into victory, trucks into the decisive weapon of the European war. German generals stopped laughing when they understood this truth. But by then, Patton was already at their gates, supplied by the greatest logistics operation in military history. If this deep dive into forgotten World War II operations moved you, if you want to discover more untold stories like the Red Ball Express that changed history without firing a shot, subscribe to WW2 War Rewind right now. We're rewinding history daily to reveal what really happened when the smoke cleared. The mechanics who modified aircraft, the drivers who delivered victory, the engineers who built the impossible. These stories deserve to be remembered. Subscribe so we can keep bringing them to light. Tomorrow we're covering another operation the textbooks missed. Don't let it pass you by.